Yes, so thank you very much for everyone in attendance. And again, thank you to the music community. So our conversation today is going to be around the Microsoft Cloud adoption in the municipalities, which I know is a big focus for a lot of the munis here in BC, across MISA and Canada. And we partnered here with Bill McCloskey from the city of Prince George to provide kind of a platform for him to also highlight his journey around cloud adoption, the Microsoft cloud adoption specifically. So yes, we've got Bill, the manager of IT services from City of Prince George, from the Compugen team here. You've got me, Brant Gomans, account executive in the public sector here in BC, based out of Vancouver. And we've got Chris Kale, also a BC resident. He is our Microsoft engagement specialist with Compugen. So I wanted to just kick things off with a quick introduction on Compugen, make sure everyone's aware of who we are and what we do. We are Canada's largest privately held provider of IT solutions, started in 1981. Since then, we've grown to about 1,500 employees with 11 offices across Canada, but providing services nationwide, coast to coast, for clients in many different sectors, whether it's public sector, enterprise, commercial accounts. Specifically for our conversation here today, we're going to be focused on the Microsoft Cloud journey, cloud adoption. And Compugen really brings a mature set of capabilities and services to help customers in their design, workshop, acceleration, and delivery of those next generation Microsoft Cloud solutions. One thing I'd like to highlight in particular is we're very invested in the public sector here in Canada. We've been strategically invested in them for over 20 years. We also lead Canada as a Microsoft LSP and service-led partner for over 35 years. Very focused, and Microsoft's one of our key partners, but we've been focused with them for a very long time. We're very proud to be able to say we manage over 650 EA agreements across Canada, including being the LSP for several municipalities here in BC, as well as the provincial level, the likes of province of BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Ontario as well, Nova Scotia, and many other sizable public sector entities. So we've got a very experienced and deep team of sales professionals, licensing experts, solution specialists, consultants, all ready to help you, clients, and provide the best-in-class service and expertise around cloud adoption. And many of you might be aware, recently Microsoft introduced their new partner certification program called Partner Sellers or P-Sellers. And these are partner employees who are certified in Microsoft to deliver various types of specialized knowledge and integration with Microsoft's teams to make sure you, the clients, get the greater value. So this is a bit of a highlight around our investment into that P-Seller program, which really differentiates us here in the Canadian market. It really gives us the opportunity to engage locally with folks like you and provide some of those future-looking business transformation conversations you normally might get from working with Microsoft Direct. You know, these program credentials ensure that working with a partner, you get that same experience. And lastly, we've got a very strong, well-developed cloud practice, but our solutions do extend beyond that. Compugen service portfolio can provide expertise across the entire technology landscape, whether it's modern workspace, enterprise network security, data center, hybrid IT. We've really got that well-developed portfolio that's technology focused. We've got the expertise and the right people to help support you. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you there, Bill. You can do a quick introduction on the city.
Sure. Thanks, Brent, and thanks, Carolyn, and thanks everyone for joining here. So I'm Bill McCloskey. I'm the manager, IT manager for the City of Prince George. I've been here about 10 years, and prior to that, I was within the local health authority here in British Columbia. So Prince George, if you're outside the province of British Columbia, or perhaps you're in the Lower Mainland, and you haven't heard of Prince George, we're approximately in the center of the province, and we're known as BC's northern capital, or at least that's what we call ourselves. Driving, it's about a 7-hour drive, 8-hour drive from Vancouver, and it's about an hour's flight or so. So that gives you an idea about how far away we are from the Lower Mainland. So next slide. So we're also home to the University of Northern British Columbia, which is ranked Canada's best small university by Maclean's magazine in 2022. We don't talk about the other years though. So next slide. Prince George is also home to the University Hospital of Northern British Columbia, which supports the UBC Medical Program's Northern Medical Program. So it's also home to the BC Cancer Centre for the North, which is the picture you see here. And it's the administrative headquarters for the Northern Health Authority, which covers a geographic area larger than France, so huge. So it's take the province, cut it in half. Northern Health Authority is about that, going up to the Alberta border, out to the ocean, and up to the Yukon border. Yeah, in terms of population, the city has approximately 79,000 residents. We have about 650 full-time staff. And here in IT, we have about 21 IT staff. So our IT staff, we're known for our excellent customer service, our extensive business knowledge, technical skills, and we also we're also known for, next slide, being able to wear shorts in pretty much any weather situation. So yeah, so that's Prince George in a nutshell.
Is that a picture of you, Bill?
No, that's one of my staff.
That's great. Thank you very much, Bill. So we'll move into our topic of discussion. And I know, Bill, we'll treat this very much as kind of a round table, give you an opportunity to highlight some of, the initiatives that you've undertaken from City of Prince George. I know since we've been engaged, we're the LSP provider for the city. And since we've been engaged, I know we've had a lot of conversations around moving to cloud adoption, the journey, the Microsoft stack. But I know for the city, it started well before you were even engaged with us. So perhaps you can kick things off and lead us through, that moving to the cloud for the city. What was really the motivating factors for Prince George at looking at moving to the cloud? What were some of those key considerations and how you imagined it looking before you even started?
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of what motivated us, there's a few things. So we had a number of on-premise systems that we hadn't been updated, and the versions were going end of life as well too. So these systems, they had a lot of care and feeding that we had to apply to them, and it was consuming a good chunk of our limited IT capacity. So we looked at the cloud as a way of not having to worry about those updates and patches. So that was a big motivation. I think like everyone else too, the pandemic was also a big driver. We needed a collaboration communication tool that we could deploy really quickly. It needed to be user friendly. Preferably it would work nicely with our existing tools. Another reason was at the time, only one of our data centers actually had power redundancy. And so we were a bit worried if we lost our primary data center and we had to rely on our secondary data center there, we were a bit at risk there. So we looked at the cloud as a way to improve our resiliency, basically, because we didn't want to wait around for those power improvements to happen to our secondary data center. So one of the last reasons was probably like everyone else, to address the cybersecurity requirements, we had to implement MFA, and we looked at the cloud and what Microsoft specifically offered in terms of MFA, and it looked like a good fit. It allowed us to use multiple tools like FOBs and apps and all that stuff in order to be able to roll out MFA quickly and address a lot of those cybersecurity requirements. Yeah.
And I know you mentioned for MFA specifically, Microsoft was a good platform in that sense. When you were looking at the collaboration tool, I know Teams is another great platform that they provide, but around the updates as well too, things going into life. Was there certain things specifically from the Microsoft stack that stood out shift and brought you towards them as a cloud platform for the adoption?
For sure, yeah. The specifically around SharePoint. So I mentioned earlier that we had some systems that were quite out of date and going end of life, and SharePoint was one of those. We had an on-premise SharePoint version at the time, and it was supplying basically our intranet. It was also our content management system for our external public-facing website. And so that one was not just end of life, it was highly customized. It was difficult to support. You know, anytime we had kind of a patch, we were always worried that it was going to break something, that kind of thing. And the other thing is, because it was our intranet system, it wasn't easily accessible from the outside because it was on-prem, and there was a lot of effort to try and get access to it from the outside. That's where we stored all our administrative procedures, our standard operating procedures were actually all on our intranet. So it wasn't easy to access from the outside. The other thing around, you know, the on-premise SharePoint is it had limited internal forms, and we didn't have a lot of workflows. And so we looked at cloud-based SharePoint as one of the first places we wanted to go. Again, it would take care of that care and feeding piece. You know, we didn't have to worry about patching or updating all that. It also gave us the ability to start to leverage some of the things like having that outside access. Starting to roll out things like Edge on the mobile platforms that gave us even a better integration. And what was the other thing is like it allowed us honestly to get rid of some of these customizations that have been just an anchor around us for a while, and able to say, okay, we're not going to do this, we're going to do more out of the box with SharePoint. And that was one of the first things that we selected. And yeah.
Nice. Okay. And I know, having spoken with lots of the municipalities and stuff before, there's always a lot of different stakeholders that are involved in this. I mean, you've got your visualization or picture from the IT department side, but there's always other stakeholders in the city. And were there any types of concerns or risks that they might have need to be navigated or considered initially when you're starting to do this? Like what were some of those conversations like, and kind of from your perspective in the IT connecting to the other aspects of the business in the city, how did that go for you?
Yeah, I think initially our IT group was super on board, just because again, servicing the on-premise system was just becoming such a burden, and knowing that we'd be able to move it onto the cloud and be more able to support it was seen as a good thing. The city staff themselves, there was a bit of feedback, negative feedback, that they were going to lose some of these customizations, but honestly they weren't working that well to begin with. And so once we were able to deploy more out of the box features that had a bit more stability to them, had a bit more resilience to them, that was well accepted as well too. Yeah, and seniorship was always supportive of moving to the cloud. We made a business case for it in terms of, here's what we would be able to reduce in terms of our IT support. Hopefully we would have less downtime for the city staff, that type of thing. It also allowed us, to move eventually off using SharePoint as our CMS for our public-facing website. So that was also a big thing, just because it wasn't a great CMS for the public-facing website. Yeah.
Yeah, some of my questions that I had regarding this, but thank you very much. Like I said, I think that it mirrors some of the experiences that a lot of the other meetings go through as well too. Go along. Want to understand too, and hopefully you can share a little bit more on just sort of what the journey really looked like, as you going down the path of cloud adoption, cloud migration, how you sort of prioritize certain things. I know you spoke a bit to the SharePoint being one of them, with the on-prem going out of life. Were there other technology adoptions that were very important, and take us through kind of how you did prioritize that, maybe who is involved a bit, again, that user adoption, you said there's some challenges with certain stuff, maybe take us through a little bit of that, any roles that partners played, the role of Microsoft itself too. But yeah, maybe you can highlight a few of these specific technologies and cloud platforms and solutions that made the most sense initially to the city.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about how the journey went and what that process was like. So the journey, it did take a while. I mean, we had to learn and adapt and test and phase out our implementation to ensure that we didn't break too many things. And that's where Microsoft and Compugen and vendor partners were able to really come in and help us. So to give you an example, we really leaned on Compugen heavily to assist us with some of the licensing questions. Prior to moving to SharePoint on the cloud and 365, we had to get help for transitioning from our Cal licensing to 365 licensing. I probably had at least a dozen calls just on licensing alone with Compugen to make sure that we were getting the right licenses for the right people, that kind of thing, and making sure that we weren't impacting people too much, as well as making sure we're trying to be as cost effective as possible. We also took advantage of a lot of workshops. I didn't mention it, but we rolled out MS Teams as well during the pandemic. That was one of the big implementations we did, and we had workshops around that. Some of the specific workshops were, we had instructor-led virtual training for a lot of the teams that were involved in, and we call them like team administrators. So they were involved in that. They manage all their teams, their channels, that type of thing. We took advantage also of some workshops to accelerate our deployment of Windows 10. This was quite a while back, but it was one of those things that I really remember that they did a great job in terms of getting that in. Microsoft's role, to speak more to that, they were instrumental to pulling the resources in to assist us with that transition from on-premise to cloud, offering workshops, directing us to useful articles, directing us to even like incentive programs or credits that enabled us to do this at a more cost-effective way. And again, I just wanted to say, Compugen has been great in that respect as well too. Specifically around the licensing piece, we'd probably still be a little bit lost if not for Compugen's help in getting us working toward the 365 licensing and off the Cal licensing.
Yeah, well, appreciate it. I know, being involved in a lot of those conversations, there's always question marks around the proper licensing, how to structure it, and when it comes to these EA agreements, right? There's a commitment up front. So we're happy to always jump into those conversations. I know we've got some really well-versed and experienced licensing specialists that you were made available to you. I think you reached out to them directly more times than you did me. So it's always good to know that the supporting team is working directly with you and helping out. So very much appreciate that feedback. So I know you also mentioned some other specific training sessions that you had. Was it mainly around administrators? Those were engaged with directly with Microsoft, if I recall, right?
Yeah.
Were there other training sessions that you found that were available to the city that you are also able to leverage, or maybe dive a little bit deeper into that one for us, Bill?
Yeah, for sure. I mentioned early on that we had some Windows 10 deployments that we were doing as well too. So some training sessions around that, specifically around getting some of the licensing done correctly. Moving, to the Windows 10 Enterprise was a big thing as well too. We had some training around MS Teams, not just for the end users that are responsible for their individual department and division teams, but also on the administrative side for MS Teams to make sure that we were deploying that securely. I just want to do a shout out as well to Kelowna. They really helped us in terms of the MS Teams governance, which basically laid out how teams were going to be requested and managed and deprecated in some cases, all the technical pieces as well. It was a great help we got from Kelowna for getting that all set up. And there was just, lots of little training, lots of works, webinars that they sent us information on that just, filled a lot of gaps that we had at the time. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. And I know this primarily is focused around Microsoft, but they're not the only cloud solution provider out there. I mean, are there other good use cases around cloud adoption, whether they're, you know, maybe it's software as a service platforms, infrastructure, so it's like other initiatives, cloud initiatives that you might want to highlight that you've taken part in from the city, you've seen a lot of great value on, you think some of these other municipalities might be able to also take a dive into or learn from?
Yeah, 100%. You know, outside of Microsoft, we had a use case here in the city that was, when I first came on, it was again one of those things that was highly customized. So it was a tool that would allow council members to access closed council confidential materials securely from a remote location. So it basically gave them the ability to view it, but they couldn't print it, they couldn't copy it, they couldn't, you know, email it, that kind of thing. Anyway, that when we first got here, it was a combination of SharePoint and Citrix and MFA, some weird MFA. Anyway, it became, again, a bit unwieldy to support. And in the end, what we ended up doing is we found a cloud-based provider that did just a fabulous job of replacing that system, and it makes it so easy for people to access externally. It makes it super easy to secure. It checked all the boxes in terms of things like you can't print, you can't email, that kind of thing. It even has the security where, you know, where somebody said, well, I can just take a picture with my phone. So it has a hidden pixel within the image that allows us to determine, you know, if that document was ever shared or ever disclosed and it was confidential. We're able to determine from that hidden pixel who it was that shared it. So it was security above and beyond what we asked for. And it was one of those things that, again, it's cloud-based, easy to access. We don't do any updates or upgrades to it anymore. Easy to secure. What's the other thing? And surprisingly cheap. It just checked all our boxes. And that's just one example of something that we've deployed that was, I feel, was kind of unique to our municipality, but it just did a fabulous job of meeting all our requirements.
That's good. Yeah, I know the more adoption and journey into these cloud technologies you start to realize some of these values. Sometimes it takes, you know, diving headfirst into them to really realize them, but always appreciate some of those shared moments, because I know from your end it sounds like getting rid of some of the customizations, offloading some of those tasks that are normally, you know, IT department responsibilities to just being part of the solutions of these cloud services, these cloud options. So yeah, lots of benefits from it. But I know too, there's always some challenges, there's some learning moments. So yeah, like, as you were adopting some of these, as you're implementing some of these, going through the training of it, maybe you can share a little bit of some of those learning moments for the rest of the attendees here, whether they're looking at going down this journey and it's nice to know beforehand, or maybe they've shared some of those learning moments as well too, and can reflect on them a little bit. But what did those look like for you and the city of Prince George?
Yeah, for sure. And this will probably sound like a broken record, but you know, for myself, you know, doing that transition to 365. It took a lot to try and understand the licensing and the differences between a user and device call and 365 plans. But you know, once you understand it, it's actually fairly easy. So to give you an example, prior to moving off the CAL licenses, we did a review of all the department roles, job descriptions. We met with all the department managers, supervisors, foremen, and we tried to get an idea of the specific roles and what they use their Microsoft tools for. Like, did they need Word? If they used Outlook, did they need desktop Outlook? Could they use, you know, web-based Outlook, that kind of thing? So from that analysis, we determined, you know, what kind of 365 plan that we would allocate per role. And at first, when we looked at that, we determined the overall cost to move from a CAL-based license model to 365 would be more expensive, but not too significant. So we thought that's great. You know, we're able to take advantage of this licensing. The only problem is we missed one question during our analysis that turned out to be fairly costly. And in the end, as we continue to move to the cloud, we're hoping to reduce some of those extra costs that we incurred. So another challenge was also, you know, rolling out MFA. I mentioned it before, and ensuring we meet the cyber insurance requirements. We have a bunch of different staff requirements here. So we pushed Microsoft Authenticator to all our city mobile devices as a 2FA authentication tool, but not all staff have a city mobile device. So we had to ensure that there were lots of options available, and that, you know, accessing or using 2FA to get into, you know, the Microsoft tool set was easy. So we rolled out things like YubiKeys. You know, we made sure that they could get a phone call to, you know, a device at their desktop. Yeah, and so that was what was great about the Microsoft tools. It allows you to implement all those different types of authentication tools in addition to just, you know, the MSFA Authenticator app. Yeah, those were probably some of the
specifically, like, did you realize that before you guys did the implementation? Was it something that you kind of clued in after the fact and were like, okay, we need to do like a quick audible on this? Was it more in that situation for you?
Yeah, it was midstream is when we realized that, oh shoot, you know what, we thought we could get away with, we have to revise, you know, maybe an F3 license is what we thought we could assign to this role. And it turned out that no, we needed a more expensive E3 license, but that we discovered that midstream after people started using their F3 licenses and started to determine, oh, what happened to this? I can't do this anymore. And initially our reaction is, well, you just have to do it differently. But then it turned out it was a bit of a showstopper. And so we had to move them, quite a few people, to E3 licenses.
Right. So definitely that deep dive with the user groups, identifying the license requirements and asking the right questions up front. Big learning moment for you.
Yeah. And unfortunately, you know, I mentioned earlier, this was a bit of we wanted to move quickly because of the pandemic and get these tools out as quickly as possible. And yeah, we probably should have, in retrospect, done a bit more deep dive or a bit of a phased implementation, that type of thing. Yeah.
That's good. And in terms of some of the other tools or feedback from the particular user groups, was there anything specifically, you know, once they started taking on and adopting some of those tools that, you know, things came up that you didn't initially thought? Were there any of those questions or situations that came up along the way?
Well, nobody likes having 2FA and doing that extra step to authenticate, you know, but we've tried to mitigate that as much as possible by, you know, expanding the amount of time that's needed between doing those 2FA, you know, or entering those 2FA prompts. Yeah, I think actually, and plus I mentioned that, you know, we, in order to get more of a common platform, we rolled out Edge to all the to mobile devices, the city phones and the city iPads and all that stuff, and getting people to move off their preferred browser over to Edge so that we could start to utilize some of the technologies related to Edge and 365. That was a bit of a challenge there as well too. Oops, sorry. And yeah.
Some of the learning curve moments, I guess, new platforms, yep. Learning, fair enough.
Sure.
Well, it's fantastic. Towards near the end of it, but like, what's sort of next for the city of Prince George? Like, maybe you can share a little bit more on your roadmap. What are maybe some of the next components of the technology you're looking to adopt? Why those ones specifically? Yeah, what's the road ahead look like for you?
Yeah, we actually have a ton going on related to some of our Microsoft Cloud products. So we're going to start leveraging the 365 plans and rolling out Intune across all devices. So we recently completed the migration of all our mobile devices to Intune, and we're working on our desktop devices now. So Intune is going to be used for our patching and our compliance, and it enabled us actually to deprecate it will enable us to deprecate our existing desktop patching solution. We've already deprecated our mobile MDM solution. And just to give a quick story around that, ever since we put in Intune, we've been able to get a much better ability to track lost or stolen devices. So just 2 weeks ago, we had a theft of a city iPad that was in a staff member's backpack. We were able to use Intune, and this is so our Intune expert was away at lunch, helped this person comes to me, and this is another thing I found about some of the Microsoft products in Intune. So myself and the help desk person, who aren't experts at this, we were able to figure out how to lock it out, locate it on a map, and we were able to tell the person exactly where it was, and kind of a dummy, but he went out and got his laptop off this guy and was able to recover the iPad within like 30 minutes. And the previous MDM solution, like I would have had no idea how to do that. And this goes to like Intune and some of the Microsoft tools. I think some of the secret sauce, it's fairly intuitive. I mean, a lot of the menu options are very similar to each other. So the look and feel is easy to figure out. And so if you can take guys like myself and we can figure it out very quickly, that I think that speaks a lot to the intuitiveness and the usability of the product. Some of the other things that we're doing is we're exploring Microsoft Forms and Power Automate. We've started a project charter on Windows Hello for Business. We're going to start rolling that as well out. We're looking at Power Virtual Agents, dabbling in that. We've talked a little bit too about using SharePoint for our document records management system. I think we're going to start kicking off a statement of work for that as well too, to do a deeper dive into that. So we have OpenText eDocs right now. It's not for one, it's expensive. A lot of our users don't necessarily like it or like its usage. It doesn't work well with other tools, like if you've got older versions of Adobe newer versions of Adobe, like Adobe Cloud, doesn't work well with those as well. And last, we've been dabbling with MS Teams apps like Shifts for leave requests, and we found that within IT, we use it, and it's just been awesome because you're able to submit, receive, approve shift requests very quickly, have it show up in people's calendars, have it show up in the manager's calendar. And it didn't take that long to develop. It was maybe a week of one of our guys' time to get a platform set up, tested, and now we're starting to roll it out to the rest of the organization. So all those paper requests or those email requests for for leaves, that all goes away, and it's cross-platform. You can use Teams on your desktop, use your mobile. It's one of those things that I think is going to be a game changer in terms of being able to use things like Teams to roll out these apps that address a specific need, and Shifts is just one of those.
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, nice provided, leveraging the maximum value for the licensing that the city's paying for already. So yeah, it's great to hear. I'll open the floor up a little bit. I don't know if there's been any questions in the chat, but does anyone have any comments or questions that they want to engage with Bill on from Muni to Muni? Now would be a great time.
You can just go ahead and unmute yourself if you have a question, or you can write it in the chat.
If questions come in through the chat, and we'll keep it open and let us know. But with that, thank you very much, Bill, for just sharing the journey of City of Prince George. I know from our engagements, I think you and the city have gone pretty far down that road. And as you explained, there's been some great value that's been provided from those. There's been some learning lessons from them. But I know hopefully through MISA, through these types of conversations, the community as a whole can reach out and they can learn and understand from each other all those different experiences. Like you mentioned, with the teams rollout, you know, you were engaged with Kelowna. They were super helpful. I'm sure you got some takeaways from just conversations with them that you probably wouldn't have been another little road bump or something during that deployment that you wouldn't have been aware of. So
Bill,
We have one question in the chat there from Don at View Royal. Are you using Teams voice for phone?
Well, if we define Teams voice as like external calling, no, but we use it a lot for internal. So obviously we're using it for video conferencing. We also use it for, like, you know, point-to-point calling between the people in departments and all that stuff. One of the features I didn't mention is with Teams on the mobile platforms, we've been able to figure out a way to actually see the users' phones using a Teams conference. And so it gives us the ability to troubleshoot if somebody's having a problem with their phone. We're able to see their screen, you know, go, okay, swipe left, go up, hit that kind of thing. So that's one of the things that, you know, we're using the Teams conferencing capabilities of. But no, we're not using voice, but it is one of those things that we are looking at as part of, if we do move to SharePoint as our document record management system, it would require us to do either a number of add-on licenses or perhaps move a number of staff to E5. And once you move to E5, then yeah, that external voice piece becomes a lot more attractive and potentially a way to deprecate our existing phone systems.
that reminds me of another aspect there too, Bill, because I know you mentioned that rollout of Intune, being able to do some of the patching, security management, the two-factor authentication as well from the security side. I know Microsoft's security licensing and security solutions on this M365 stack's grown and been developed really well. Have the city looked at some of those, implemented some of those solutions as well too? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, that's exactly one of the use cases that we're looking at. We have a ton of laptops that, like, probably over 100, where it's not getting regular patches. And we've tried to track some of these staff down, and a lot of times it sits in cabinets and stuff like that, or it's something that they just haven't powered up in a while. So we're looking at using the Intune compliance features that would enable us to say, you're not going to log in with this laptop that you haven't plugged in a month until all the patches are done, and not just the Microsoft patches. It would be the application patches and all that stuff. So we're looking at using that as a way to reduce our risk for these devices that, you know, don't get updated a lot, and that's where Intune, you know, will play a huge factor in that.
Well, thanks again, Bill. And yeah, I know through the community, through NISA, there's always more opportunities to share, but I really do appreciate you taking the time today, along with us in Compugen, to share a little bit of that journey that City of Prince George has gone through. We move into the next little bit of here, the last few minutes, 10 minutes or so. I'm going to hand it over here to Krish Kale, who's our engagement specialist, just to finish things off a little bit more around the Compugen Accelerate Modern Workspace. It's kind of our curated journey around adoption, service delivery, solution delivery. So Krish, the floor is yours here.
Thanks, Brand. Thanks, Bill. So here's what I'm not going to take too much time, because I know we've got a little bit of time left, and I want to leave time for questions if anybody has it. I'm here today to talk about a methodology that Compugen has kind of curated after about 40 years of being in the business. It's something that we like to look at as the bone structure of a successful engagement. Brand, could you pull the next slide? Thanks. So yeah, what we do is, whenever we look at an engagement, we try to break it down into different stages, and we can do all of them, we can do some of them. It comes down to what our customer, what the smaller municipalities, what the people in PubSec, what the people in the mid-market, what do they want us to do? And the reason we leverage the methodology is because we're all speaking the same language, we're all aligned to the same goals, and the most important thing is we're aligned to the same timeline, because a lot of these things are questions that people kind of forget, or as the more they kind of go down through the methodology. But let me take you quickly through what the methodology looks like as an overview, and then I'll tell you all about a few engagements that I've been part of in the last 2 months, so that y'all can maybe understand it a little better. So we break down the Accelerate methodology into 4 primary stages, right? And I'll call them primary because we can do any of them or all of them. So we break it down into discovery and purchase, deployment planning, deployment and adoption, which is my favorite, and manage. Now, to talk about discovery and purchase, the thing that we like to focus on and why I love this process is because we want to understand the underlying business outcome that you are trying to achieve. Yes, you want to have MFA, you want to have Intune, you want to get Teams calling, you want to get some other facet of security or collaboration within your environment. But what was the underlying business, the business outcome that you were trying to achieve? What was that one idea that somebody had? Like, for example, I want to be able to deploy all of my mobile devices, every laptop, as easily as I deploy mobile devices like cell phones. I want people to be able to take it out of a box and start using it. That is what I want, Krish. And I was like, okay, that is the business outcome that we're going to try and achieve. Then we immediately jump into the next stage, which is the success plan. And this is something that's very crucial, because after working with so many different verticals, I've understood one simple fact, that everyone will define success differently. Where somebody will define success as, I have the icons on the screen, great job, everyone. Some people want everyone in their organization, at least 80% of them, to be using the tool. The reason why I like deployment and planning as the second phase is it allows us to, one, remediate and mitigate any risk that we have seen over 40 years of running. And it also allows us to kind of understand what the next step is, what could happen, what do we know that is going to, kind of, what might fall apart. And then, as I said, my favorite, which is deployment and adoption. A lot of people, as I said, right, they define success in their own particular way. When I work with municipalities, the biggest thing that I realized is you all have brilliant IT staff on hand, and they all tackle massive amounts of work. So sometimes they might be able to get those icons on the screen, but they might not be able to help everybody in the organization adopt the technology. They might not even be able to identify whether the bones of the building that they're building on is stable enough to handle the new security that you're adding, the new collaboration tools that you're adding. And after they add everything, they don't even know if people are going to use them to their fullest potential. We've had situations where people have looked at Teams as just a platform that people can talk on, when Teams can do so much more. And that's why I like it, because the beauty of all of this brilliant software, all of these brilliant tools that you all are getting access to, is that there's so much more than they can do than just the face value. And my last, and the reason I like to touch base on this at the end of every engagement, is how do you want to manage this? Because it's an important question, right? Those brilliant IT minds that are helping support your municipalities, they have a stack of work that they have to tackle every day, all of the new initiatives, all of the new plans. And who's going to manage that infrastructure? Do you think that the workload that they have has enough room to manage that new M365 environment, or manage the new security and compliance that you all want to dive into? Or do you want a partner like Compugen to kind of take the lead and just handle it so that they can focus on the more important daily tasks? So yeah, that's the overview of what Accelerate looks like. But I want to take you all through what does it actually mean? What do I do? And what does Compugen do? Where does that partner come in? How are they helping? They can't just be there to tell you this is what we see, but what else are we bringing to the table? What is that value add? And that I'm going to try to answer in the next slide. Brian, could you pull it up? Thanks, Brian. So this is what the journey would look like. And I'm going to throw 2 examples of municipalities that I've been working with for the past 3 months to help them. And that's kind of how I've understood that this vertical, this sector can truly enjoy Accelerate. Let's talk about a municipality that wanted to deploy, just like Bill, MFA and Intune. Here's what happened. They reached out to us, I think it was about 3 months ago, somewhere in Feb. And they're like, oh, we have everything we need. And we just need some kind of guidance to make sure we're doing everything correctly. I was like, oh, so, and then they're like, oh, what would it cost? And I'm like, why would it cost anything? Because you have access to M365, you have access to something called Fast Track. And the beauty of Fast Track and the beauty of us being a Fast Track enabled partner is you have access to something called Fast Track by Compugen. So not only do you have within your tenant all the material necessary to deploy something that a capable IT mind can deploy, but when you do it through Compugen, you also get a weekly cadence with us, which means we have a technical resource allotted to you who will be able to, without putting fingers to a keyboard, give you industry best practices, tell you, guide you to a big extent on what can the next step be. This should be the next step. And then you can kind of identify whether, okay, is this getting out of hand? Do I just need somebody else to come in? Or wait, this is exactly what I need. And the reason I like Fast Track is because it gives everything that you need to kind of deploy Fast Track is already within your tenant. When you leverage Compugen, you just get that weekly cadence so that you know that every step you're taking forward, you're doing it knowing all the other pitfalls that everyone went into. And that is why I like these services. But let's talk about 2 other things that Bill kind of touched on, which are workshops and assessments. The beauty of jumping into a platform like Microsoft, or let's keep it vendor agnostic, anyone, to be honest today, is that they have funding available to help you adopt their technology. Whether they do that through helping you assess your current environment to see if it's ready for the change, to see if it's to give you an overarching view on everything IT, so that you know, okay, I have these many licenses deployed here. I might need to rework this. I have so much hardware that's coming to end of life. I might need to either talk to Compugen or talk to a partner about refreshing that hardware, or is it so outdated that I can just move everything to the cloud, which is more cost effective? All of these questions that you immediately get when you think of making change, assessments allow you to kind of jump in and get those answers at least, or at least look at it from a top-down view. And the beauty of it is organizations like Microsoft and everybody else, they have funding already allotted to these kind of engagements that help you along the journey. Let's talk about, and I'm going to kind of use one of the questions that was in the chat, Teams calling. I love the fact that people are now talking about Teams calling for 2 reasons. One, VoIP is actually a more cost-effective solution than hardlines. It has fewer downsides than ever before. And the brilliance of it is most of us now use our phones more than we use our laptops, which means that being able to collaborate over that, not having to deal with a hard line consistently and the cost and the refresh infrastructure, it's just something that I've kind of found a lot of people in the market are more leaning towards, because again, it's just more cost effective and it allows you to keep collaborating. But let's talk about where workshops kind of come into play. Workshops allow you to kind of jump into and see what a solution will look like in your environment. So for example, you want to see what Teams calling would look like in your environment. The beauty is that there is a workshop that is, again, there is funding available for these things, for these engagements, where Microsoft would pay us to deliver that workshop to you so that you can actually see what will it look like, how will it work. Your IT professionals, your decision makers will be able to ask somebody, not in an example, not in a demo tool, but in your own environment, what it would look like. What are those things? And that's the beauty of why I like Accelerate. It leverages vendor funding, partner experience, and it focuses on you getting the most ROI for your investments. And yeah, the The example here now, it's a very, very start to finish example, but everything from putting you into a Microsoft immersion experience, discovering the business case that you want to achieve after that, helping you assess your current environment, helping you leverage a workshop to seeing what that tool looks like in your environment, figuring out whether you want to deploy it yourself or leverage us to deploy it, actually deploying it, putting those icons on the screen, and then helping you adopt the technology and managing it. That's the beauty of Accelerate. And yeah, that's my piece. I'm going to kind of let the brand take over again because
I appreciate it. Yeah, I know we're coming at to the last final minutes here, so we'll close things down. But again, big thank you, Bill, for taking the time to take us through the Prince George journey. Chris for taking us through the Compugen Accelerate methodology. Just some things up from the Compugen end. Yes, this is our approach. It's always centered and focused on what the customer's looking to achieve, what the outcomes they're looking to get. As those are always individualized to each organization, each municipality, whatever it may be. But from the partner side, we're here to support the whole journey, a piece of the journey, as Chris mentioned. It's just we're just a phone call away. But I'll wrap things up there. A big thank you again to Misa. Thank you very much for allowing us to present on our Microsoft Cloud adoption journey. And again, it's much appreciated from the sponsorship side. We're very invested into the municipal community here in BC. So thank you.
Well, you're very welcome, and thank you for all the commitment that you make to the association and for everybody that was here today. We will look forward to seeing you all at the conference in Kelowna, and hopefully we'll see you much before then. So Compugen will be there again as a sponsor, so we're looking forward to visiting you in your booth. So thanks everyone. Enjoy your rest of your week, and we'll see you soon.